So hi, my name is Mark Pritchard. I am one of the co-owners of Sanctum. The Sanctum has been a dream of mine for the last 22 years. I initially first started working in the gym, did my PT qualifications back when I was 18, as I was waiting to go from school to university to study sport and exercise science, and ultimately I fell into the corporate career. But the Sanctum is something that is built on all of my experience, whether that is business, whether that is science, whether that is health, wellness, fitness, and it's trying to be something that pulls all those elements together so that people can focus on high performance and being the best versions of themselves. So for me, it started from a young age. I was always very passionate about sport. I think I started playing rugby when I was 6. By the time I was 13, I was playing county hockey, county cricket, county squash, county rugby. And therefore, I've always taken, I guess, my health and fitness quite seriously. I suffered from asthma as a child growing up as well. And for me, the playing of sport was one of the things which obviously meant I could build my capacity, particularly from a lungs perspective, to not have to take the medication and suffer from the asthma attacks that I did at a young age, going back quite a way. But I think I've always been someone who is very driven, very focused in achieving my goals. Even from a young age, when I set my mind to things, I wanted to achieve them. And growing up and being at school, I struggled academically. I didn't realize, but at the age of 9, I was diagnosed with quite severe dyslexia, particularly from a spelling, but also from a short-term memory perspective. And therefore academically I was never the strongest, but always excelled in sport, and I knew that was something that, one, I could be successful at, but also made me feel good. And I can remember being 13 years old and wanting to go to a particular school, one, because the sport was very competitive, very high standard, had a good reputation, but also because friends were going there. My parents hadn't planned for me to go to that school. They'd had 2 other choices, of which I was less happy about. And I can remember talking to them over and over again and them saying, well, if you want to go to that school, you will have to get a scholarship. So I think I went into my junior school the next day, spoke to my sports teacher, got him to register me for the scholarship. I organised with my friend's parents to take me down for the day to be assessed and to bring me back. And actually I ended up getting the sports scholarship, which I then took to my parents and told them that would be the school that I was going to. So I've always been fairly driven. And I think that mindset has stayed with me through my teens in terms of, again, developing the experience from the sports background I have, but also then finding ways in which my learning capacity allowed me to do things like my GCSEs, my A-levels, my university degree, my masters and other qualifications in a way that has benefited me longer term. Well, as I say, growing up, for me, health was always important because of the sport, particularly from the fitness side of it, and being the best possible sportsman I could, especially as I wanted that to be my career, suffering from asthma from a young age, but also I think at the age of 10, my parents were both smokers. I also grew up in a nursing home and grew up looking at people with lots of illnesses, lots of ailments, not particularly always the healthiest. Different generations, of course, but my mum being diagnosed with asthma when I was about 10, and then ultimately losing my mum to meningitis at the age of 14, and then my dad suffering from a severe heart attack when I was 16. It has been something that fundamentally has become a non-negotiable in my day-to-day. For me, bodybuilding came around at a time where I probably needed something else. Having played sort of semi-professional and professional rugby, and then injuries having taken their toll, I wasn't enjoying the platform that I got so much from growing up, and I needed to find something else. As a result, I went into more sort of powerlifting and strength work, of which I was then less comfortable with my body shape, my fitness, etc. And at the time, I was at a gym where it was full of competitive bodybuilders, and they actually suggested maybe trying something different because of the conditioning side of bodybuilding, whereas I had the structure and the strength. There was an element I needed to deliver, and actually having something where I could focus on the process to be the best version of myself seemed something that, or became something that was quite natural for me to chase. I think it's juggling multiple things, and I've mentioned about non-negotiables before. Now, when you are a competitive bodybuilder, you have to balance the nutrition, the training, the cardio, the discipline, along with, for most of us in the amateur ranks. We have to obviously have a career, pay our bills. We have to spend time with our loved ones, build our relationships. And for me, it was about putting structures in place that allowed me to do that, identifying what non-negotiables were, but building a framework which I knew I could fit pieces around and move things around and still allow me to have the best of both worlds, or to make the most of the opportunities that I had. Oh, for me, definitely the hardest part was the mental side of it, whether it's from a professional perspective or from a performance perspective. As human beings, we always suffer from an element of imposter syndrome. And bodybuilding is no different. It plays tricks on us. It plays tricks on what we see, what we think, what we feel. And there is always an element of, actually, am I good enough? Can I do this? It is tough, it is hard, but so are so many other things in life. And it does build an element of resilience into what you're doing. But for me, definitely the mental side of that imposter syndrome, do I belong? Can I do it? Am I where I need to be? Was the thing that actually you get to a point where you know you just have to trust the process. And you can always talk to the people around you as well to have that level of either reassurance or not necessarily validation, but perspective, when ultimately you see yourself in the mirror every day and don't necessarily see the changes that are happening in the background. I think there's always been an element of sacrifice. And I think a lot of people who talk about balance, it's something that is important, but balance is something that is acute. It can be achieved at that point in time, but at another point in time, balance may look something differently. I think, to have balance in one thing changes throughout the year, throughout the competing cycle, throughout life, throughout your career. And, for me, there have definitely been times where I've sacrificed my personal relationships, whether that's friends, whether that's time out, whether that's being able to go out and do things and enjoy yourself in a social setting. There are times where, I've probably had to pull back on other areas. And it's always been a difficult job, but I think you have to set what are your non-negotiables in that and make sure they are the things that you stick to as part of your routine. So the corporate world for me was, I guess, a secondary option. Playing sort of professional, semi-professional rugby, as I said, got injuries, and therefore I decided to take up my place at university. During my leaving school and before doing that, I worked in a gym. I did my fitness instructor qualifications, my personal training qualifications, because it was something that I was interested in and I thought would benefit me in terms of a longer term career. As injuries took their toll, so herniated discs, collapsed vertebrae, I decided I'd better have a plan B, and therefore went to university to study my Bachelor of Science in Sport and Exercise Science. Again, it was something that I was interested in and thought I could utilize long term for my own benefit rather than studying something that I was less interested in. Going through that, my best friend absolutely sold me a dummy and told me to go down and work in the corporate world in London because it was very glamorous and he was having a great time. So fell into the corporate world in an area that was not anything to do with health, fitness, or this kind of lifestyle. And it was at the start of the financial services crisis, and decided that actually the job I was doing wasn't for me. But I loved elements of it. I therefore looked at things that I could use my degree for in a setting that I had an interest in. And that's where I then moved into medical devices and pharmaceuticals and joined Johnson & Johnson at the start of my corporate career itself. I've been fairly lucky, and there are things that a high value to me in terms of behaviors or mindsets. Things like passion. So being passionate for the things I was doing, which made me want to be curious, learn more about them, be the best version of them, understand them at a deeper level. It also helped me become empathetic, seeing people, particularly from a healthcare perspective, in the challenges that they had faced day to day, the impact that had on their lifestyle, their lives, their loved ones, the people around them. Certainly resilience, if you want to be successful, you have to put in the work and the hours, and then ultimately the drive, the drive to be better, the drive to want to progress. And through my career, I've lived by those four things, and I've subsequently had the opportunity to do my marketing diploma, to do my master's in business administration. I've become a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute, and it's pulling those different areas together from my background, whether it's health, fitness, illness, lifestyle, business, where I've been able to look at more complex problems, and rather than having one way of solving them, having multiple. I think for me, it was those values. It was the relentlessness to want to improve myself for the benefit of other people. Working in healthcare and medtech, the more I could understand the devices, the illnesses, the patients, the physiology that they were going through, I could then utilize my degree. I could then utilize my understanding of the technology, the procedures, the anatomy. And ultimately, I could then start to think about actually, how do I make a bigger impact for these people in this setting? That's then taken me through, as I've developed in my career, to become more of a senior leader, an organizational leader, or an exec, to focus on actually, how do I utilize all those things that I've learned to help develop other people? And I think that's the thing that I maybe differ slightly from others. It's bringing all those different pieces together, but with the same goal of not just myself, but how do I use the things and experiences that I've learned to help improve or develop other people as well. I think just post-COVID, actually. So during COVID, I was still working at Johnson & Johnson. I had done my master's in business administration, and the organization was shifting. My life was shifting. I, at the time, was going through a separation and a divorce. I had met Matt now, my obviously husband, and I had an opportunity to stay with the organization in a role that I had already been doing 3 years, or leave the organization and potentially try and do something different, which aligned to, again, my mindset, my career goals. I decided to leave Johnson & Johnson after 14 years. I decided to relocate to a different part of the country. And obviously I decided to change my lifestyle in terms of the new relationship that I was entering with Matt. And from a career perspective, you never know whether someone else is going to see the same value that you potentially see in yourself. And that period of transition where I'd left an organization and had an opportunity and time to change was stressful, because you would speak to people who maybe you didn't get that interview or you didn't get that job offer that ultimately you thought you were well about, and you have a lot of responsibility. And I think managing those different areas of pressure was probably the most stressful time for me, because again, that level of imposter syndrome is something that never quite leaves the back of your mind. For me, I think particularly, as I grew my career at Johnson & Johnson, we talk a lot about the energy that you need for performance in the corporate ladder. How do you have less days off sick? How do you manage stress levels? How do you have the energy to spend the time with your loved ones when you are working 60, 70, maybe even 80-hour weeks? And actually, the preparation that you go through from a sports perspective in terms of your training, your improvement, your development, your sort of day-to-day repetitive elements where you nail and hone your skills, is really no different in a corporate perspective than it is in an athlete or a fitness perspective. You are looking to optimize the areas of small margin to make improvements, and it's the same philosophy, it's the same ethos, it's the same structures, just in a different environment. Again, I think I've been very lucky in the opportunities and experiences that I've had, and there is a famous saying, I think, by Chris Bumstead, which pressure is a privilege. And actually, to be in a position where you can start your own business, you can do your own thing, you can follow your own dreams, creates an element of pressure for yourself. That pressure, though, is a privilege. It's a privilege to be in that space. But another way to look at it is that actually that privilege is a responsibility. And what I started to realize through my career, as I said, there was always an element for me of how do I help other people, whether it's patient pathway optimization, whether it is recovery from illness or surgery, whether it is the coaching from a competitive athlete perspective, whether it is understanding people's mental state or challenges in capacity from a family life perspective. I've had some fairly significant life events through my career. I think I've pretty much experienced everything that you would think of by the time I was 38. So obviously married, divorced, made redundant. I lost both my parents. I've moved countries. I've changed jobs. I've had most significant life events. I think the only thing I haven't had is children. But obviously then my sister, being a single parent of 2 kids, saw very closely the challenges that individuals face when in that situation. And for me, that privilege and experience and responsibility to therefore help each other is really what drives me. I think people who aren't able to necessarily see the wood through the trees, they are unable to join the dots or see the different contexts and perspectives in which their landscape or their experience lies, and be able to share some experience and bring different ideas to the table. So that could be from a young professional looking to develop their career, but also maintain a healthy, strong physique so that they can perform at their best, so that they can work the hours and manage the stress levels that they need to do to remain healthy for their loved ones. It could be the young family who are struggling for energy and time to spend quality time with their children at the weekends because they are so full on through the week that actually when they get to the weekend, they're tired, they're run down and need a pickup in order to have that quality of life. And it could be someone who is facing illness, ailment, injury, but also understands the benefit of staying strong, staying responsive, staying healthy again, so that they can be the best versions of themselves and have longevity in whatever it is they want to do. For me, it's understanding the complexity of all those different things and bringing my experience together to help in those situations. I like solving problems. And for me, where people can't understand the complexity of solving that problem, I think that's where my strength lies. It's always about having an impact, whether that is short term or long term. It is certainly being genuine. I think having a unique viewpoint, but being able to make a difference, whether that's to someone on a day-to-day basis or whether it's that to someone over a longer period of time. You know, the career transformation, the athletic performance, the longer term goals in which people have, and being able to balance and change and adapt what is needed to be done at particular times so that they can reach that goal, because there is definitely no one size fits all approach in this industry. So if you're interested in what we're able to offer here at the Sanctum or personally through the Sanctum coaching, please feel free to reach out to us, drop us a DM, or reach out to us on our website and send us an email to find out more.